Welcome to the Snowbirds Expat Radio Podcast. I'm Gerry Scott, founder of the Snowbirds US Day Tracker and the Canada Physical Presence Tracker app. In today's episode, we'll be discussing Canadians moving back to Canada from the US with immigration lawyer Evelyn Ackah of Ackah Law. Evelyn is the founder and managing lawyer of Ackah Business Immigration Law, which was founded on December 1st, 2010 in Calgary. And before we came on air, we were kind of teasing Evelyn about the Calgary Flames and asking if the riots had stopped. And Mike reminded me that there's only riots in Vancouver, so after hockey games. Evelyn's practice focuses on Canadian and U.S. immigration law. Now, before we start asking Evelyn some questions here, Evelyn sent me over an email a couple of weeks ago, and it really was about her journey, her parents' journey to Vancouver from Ghana. And I'll tell you something, if anybody wants a copy of this email, it will bring tears to your eyes. I mean, this says a lot about Evelyn being so committed to helping Canadians move back to Canada from the United States. But it was a great email, and I've read it a few times. I've read it to my wife, and what a great story. And
thank you so much. I appreciate it, Gerry. Thanks for having me.
Oh, you're very, very welcome. Well, we look forward to it. We've got some very interesting questions for you. So we'll jump right into it because I know your time is limited. You're very, very, very busy.
Just like you.
Immigration law. That's right. You know, it's funny because we were talking about Evelyn has a wonderful podcast, which is called Ask Immigration Lawyer Evelyn Ackah. And I'll tell you, I've been a guest on her show, and it's very, very interesting. I'm constantly going through your podcasts because we get so many questions about Canadians looking for ways to spend more time down in the States. Mm-hmm. And of course, Americans coming up to here. So here we go.
Okay.
And we're going to remind people a few times of Evelyn's wonderful podcast that's available for all the listeners out there. Okay. So the first question I have, and a lot of these questions, it's funny because when we're talking about immigration, nothing is simple. So the first question we have, can Canadian citizens living in the U.S. return to Canada?
Yes, they can. When you're a Canadian citizen, Gerry, you have a Canadian passport, you can always come home. That's the real value of being a citizen, different from a permanent resident where you need to confirm your status as a permanent resident by spending 2 years out of every 5 years physically in Canada, or you're accompanying a Canadian citizen abroad. But Canadian citizens can always return to Canada unless there's some criminality or something that has made them inadmissible as even Canadian citizens. But it's a very, very, very high bar. That almost never happens.
You know, it's funny because Evelyn and I've got to know each other quite well over the last couple of years. And I apologize because we tend to kind of finish each other's sentences. So that was going to be kind of part way through there. That was what I was going to ask you. So a lot of the Canadians that go down south go down on what they call a green card. And that green card can lead to citizenship if they choose to. But what happens to that Canadian's green card when they do return? And is there a process to turn it in? Can they keep it forever? What is the answer?
Well, it really depends on the intention of the person when they return to Canada as green card holders and Canadian citizens. So if they're coming back to Canada and they got green card status in the States, Gerry, they're able to give it up at the airport to the CBP, the Customs and Border Patrol, the U.S. Immigration, and they basically give it up as they leave. However, if they have a thought that I'm coming back for a year, sick parents, whatever the situation is, I do have the intention to remain in the U.S. after a year or two, or being temporarily transferred for work, there's something called a U.S. reentry permit that they can complete, seeking permission to be out of the country longer than the normal period of a green card holder without abandoning their green card status.
Now, how quickly do you like to get involved with these Canadians that are planning a move back to Canada? Is it 6 months, a year, 2 years? I mean, what's best for you?
Well, I mean, I think it's always good to have a plan in place before they actually take that big step, right? So that we can make sure they have the right information. But once they decide they're returning, all that really has to happen is what's their intention? Are they going to give it up? So ideally within 6 months. And the reason is because that assumption is around the 6 month mark that they can go back. After a year and they haven't applied for the US reentry permit, it's now the burden is on them to prove to US immigration they have not abandoned every time they return. So it's useful to get that document in place if there's that return plan. If there's no return plan, they can give it up whenever they want, and they can contact me at any time that works for them.
My colleagues, Dean Morrow and Carson Hamill, wrote a great article, a great blog that was talking about, the most common mistakes that Canadians make when they move back to Canada. And number one on the list was not hiring an immigration lawyer. So we'll make that blog available as well.
I appreciate it. I'd love to see that for sure.
No, they did a great job. They've got a lot of great articles and blogs that they've written around this cross-border issues of Canadians returning or Americans returning back to United States. Now, the other question that I had was, when is the best time of the year? Is it seasonal? Is it early January when people move back? Is it what do you find is the best time to move back to?
Well, I find that, the immigration and tax, as you know, too, they kind of work together. So I think to make it clean, we've had clients who plan. So we'll talk to them through the fall. What's the plan? What's the timing? They're lining up all their ducks in a row, and then they will leave at near the end of December so that they can finish the tax year on the US side, and then to start that residency and the new tax year in Canada. So that, that's a clean process, and it makes it simpler for their accountants for sure. But it can be any time of the year, quite honestly. Yeah.
Now, it almost seems like it's a form of renouncing in the sense that you're coming back and you're giving something up. What's the big difference between renouncing and giving up your green card?
Well, I feel like it's almost the same. Like, renunciation is what they call it officially. You're basically giving it up. And you want to do that sometimes for tax too, because it means that you might not have all the same obligations on the US side when it's formal and you've got the stamp and you've got the piece of paper that shows you have legally renounced, given it back, your green card. And then it goes through the US CIS system. And that will be done. You won't have it any longer. So if the Canadian maybe 6 months later returns to the US for business meetings or tourism, you want it in the system that they're not coming as a green card holder. So, I think that it's not seasonal, but also it's basically the same. The renunciation stage can be done at the airport with the proper paperwork and the communication in advance with the border officials. And they take it from you. They literally take it and then shut it down. Yeah.
One of the, you can go online nowadays and there's so much information available for Canadians moving back home. And, one of the things they used to always say is make sure you have a job lined up. How difficult, I mean, for a Canadian returning home, that's not a problem. But what about asking them to buy a residence if they're not really established back in Canada? Is that still highly recommended that people, renting a place is not a problem, but buying a place, is that becoming a problem nowadays?
I don't see it as a problem, but I think it's really about tax. And, so for me, the reason that returning could be an issue with intention for a citizen is if, let's say, they have a spouse from another country now, and they want to sponsor that spouse as a permanent resident. In that case, the Canadian citizen needs to show that there is a plan to return. The intention is there. They're not just getting permanent residence for their spouse to stay in the States or stay in Mexico, wherever they are. So they have to show, I'm looking for work, we're talking to realtors, we're looking at places to live. There has to show that as soon as that spouse gets PR, they're on their way back. Because you can't apply for spousal PR as a citizen abroad without that intention. When it comes to citizens coming back, I've never personally experienced it that they need to buy something. It could be, again, a tax measure to show that you've got a permanent establishment now and that you've relocated your previous tax location and now you've actually committed to Canada. So this is why when you and I work together and talk a lot, we always say, in addition to your services and wealth management and the cross-border planning, is immigration, but also tax, because a lot of this is critical on the tax side for clients.
As a Canadian that is out of the country for 25, 30 years, and they decide to come home, I mean, there's got to be issues of their SIN numbers and restarting
Still
things
works.
and their medical.
Medical is an issue. The SIN number is exactly the same. Doesn't change. And so they might have to go to Service Canada and just get it reinstated, or tell them, now I have an address, now I'm back. But the health card piece is the key, because usually you have to show you're resident. And that doesn't mean you have to buy a house. It means you have to show them you have an address for 3 months, or every province is a little different how they deal with medical, to get it reinstated so you can continue to benefit from health coverage in the province that you're in. So it's not really a big deal for immigration, because you're a citizen. You've got a valid passport, I'm assuming, that you're traveling into, and getting your SIN card. Bank accounts might take some time to get opened. You have a SIN card to do that as well. And then you're able to kind of start your life, whether you're working or back to Canada to retire even.
So I guess I'm thinking about this. I'm going to become this character that's lived in the United States for the last 25, 30 years. And I pick up the phone and I call Evelyn. And what is the process and that you take me through that's going to allow that I get everything right?
Well, I always talk about, one, how long you've been away, what the plan is. You coming for work? Are you coming to retire? Do you own a business? I kind of just investigate their backgrounds a little bit so I know more. And also I ask them if they're married or have a partner or children, what are their nationalities? Because often we have a family coming back now, and she's a very advanced professor at the university and will be working in a really high level role. And her husband is the same as her career-wise, but he's a Spanish citizen. So immediately you're like, okay, we got to deal with the kids. Did they register their birth abroad ever? And if not, we've got to deal with that if they're old, if they're not over age, and get them citizenship. And then we have to deal with the spouse's PR. So the process is usually digging into the backgrounds of the family members who are coming, what the plan is, what the intention is. And then I try to give them the advice that they need so we can structure their return to Canada successfully.
Now, it's not just Canadians returning with green cards. It's also Canadians who have married a U.S. spouse and now they're moving back and they've got dual citizenship.
Mm-hmm.
Is that any more complicated? And I guess the question is that we've gone through this process a few times where that Canadian moves home and they look forward to renouncing. So is it, I guess my question is that how common is it? Is it almost like 50-50 green card holders and dual citizens? They've received their U.S. citizenship? Or
What's so interesting? I see more people on the green card side probably renouncing than citizenship, unless, and because in the U.S., if you hold U.S. citizenship and even another citizenship, they look at your worldwide income. So sometimes people are dealing with, I don't want to deal with that. I'm not going to keep filing in the US. So it really depends on usually their volume of revenue and their estate plan. And this is usually done in collaboration with their accountant or tax advisor. What makes more sense? Is it worth giving up? Or do you still have a number of assets you're going to keep in the States, may return in the future? How do we deal with that so that, you're not being dinged on the tax side? So, yeah, I don't see as much citizenship renunciations as I do more green card, because they know with green card, they're going to lose it anyway at some point because they're gone too long.
And, and as I'm thinking through the last couple of years, we've met so many people that are actually, this is the hardest part, is when you're seeing somebody who lives in Canada, has a principal residence, but they have their green card, and they seem to be going kind of back and forth. And I don't really know, are they Canadian? Are they U.S.?
Mm-hmm.
Are you seeing a lot of that as well? Especially a town like Calgary, you've got so many people.
We do. Lots of back and forth. But I mean, at the end of the day, it's about what's their citizenship. Like I was just talking to somebody today who's a Canadian citizen and wants to spend lots more time in the US than her 6 months less a day. And I was just saying, like, you need to talk to your wealth advisor and you need to figure out how you're going to stay there. Are you going to work? You know, do you have family that can sponsor you? So, you know, I'm seeing it, but I'm not seeing it as a problem because what they're doing is they're going back and forth so that they can continue to meet that 6 months less a day maximum of time. So that's why there's that movement. It's like you know already the maximum time you can spend in the States, and you need to be able to plan to be back in Canada in time.
You know, there's a great article that came out on the out with the Globe and Mail this morning, and they were talking about how there's so much more information sharing going back and forth with the Canadian and U.S. governments, and these people are getting themselves in a lot of trouble, and being taxed on worldwide income, and their understanding is, well, I never earned a dollar in the United States. How can they tax me? So it's becoming a bigger problem. It addresses healthcare. It addresses immigration. It is just unbelievable how this is becoming, creating a lot of opportunities for Evelyn.
I don't know if it's creating opportunities for me or for you. You know, for me, it's most of the people that we work with, you know, are coming for work or family and going to the US for work or family. So it's usually only people that, whether it's political reasons or whatever's motivating them to leave the US and come back. And I always say you don't have to make a decision right away. You know, I always feel like come and live here if you've got legal status for a year or two, at least if you're a citizen, before you make that decision, of course, with tax and wealth advisor advice, because you might not like it. It might not be your cup of tea. So rather, before you do that big transition, make sure it's really where you want to be.
Now, when these Canadians are coming back to Canada, we're seeing all kinds of things, like even when it comes down to their vehicles, you know, trying to bring that vehicle across the border. And you must work with good custom people, custom officials that take care of all those tariffs and all those taxes. And does that come up a lot? What people should be doing with some of their assets? Can I bring those assets back to Canada, or am I better off to sell them and start fresh?
It comes up with respect to cars, quite honestly, because sometimes people want to drive up and bring their cars with them. And the biggest question, I mean, again, I'm not a customs expert, but the biggest question is, do you own the car outright? They need to own the car outright before they can come across with evidence of ownership and license, et cetera, and insurance. If they're leasing the car, they have a big problem ahead of them, and it's not so easy to just come on up. You know, it's interesting. I was with some friends recently, and one of their sons bought him an e-car. I don't know if it was a Tesla, and he was just, you know, bought his dad a car, which is so lovely, and brought it up, drove it up, and then he encountered all these issues at the border because he was leasing it for his father with the plan of buying it. And it sat there near the border for like a month until they could deal with him buying it outright and transferring it before. So you don't want to come up to Canada unless you own the car outright and have all the evidence of ownership. If you've got a lease, sometimes it's better to leave it behind and deal with it and buy something new in Canada. That's the extent of my car customs knowledge.
Well, one quick little car story for you. When we had a family 2007 Volkswagen Jetta. My wife had the vehicle. She had it through work, and then we bought it outright, and we let our daughter drive it and destroy it for the next 4 years, as young drivers do with these parents' cars. And then we shipped it to Maui, and we were so impressed that it cost us $1,025 to ship it to Maui. As soon as we got to Maui, they said, "Whoa!" When we went through the safety inspection, they said, "Oh, this car is in kilometers." It was quite
really
amusing. It was one of those things, and unless you know the local safety people, be careful what I say here. I'm going to incriminate myself.
Yeah.
But they said that, okay, we'll tell you what, honk the horn, turn on your brake, turn on your signal lights, put on your brakes. Okay, it's good to go.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know, but I caution people, be careful. What appears to be something really intelligent can make you look pretty silly afterwards.
Oh my goodness, that's hilarious.
So the other question I have, and I think you've kind of answered this before, but um, what happens if you lose your Canadians, or how do you lose your citizenship? And is there ever a process? Because some people, is there quite a process that's called renouncing? And why would you ever even consider renouncing?
Yeah, I would
It,
never consider renouncing Canadian citizenship. I can't even think of a situation unless you're taking citizenship in another country that does not allow you to have other citizenship. So, for instance, in Germany, and I think some of the Netherlands countries, I've dealt with this before, I think Holland, it's really challenging for them because they maintain permanent residence because they can never become citizens. At least Germany's changing now if you can show you've got real ties and businesses, et cetera, there. But that's the reason. So some people have to decide what's more important to them, the other country or Canada. That's the only time I've seen it where they may renounce it if they're going to be living somewhere else and they don't get recognition, or they can't get citizenship in another country because they already hold a Canadian citizenship. But yeah, it's not very common. I don't deal with that or see as much of that as you would think. But right now we have a client that's becoming a Canadian citizen. She's about to do the oath, and she said, "Oh, I need to wait a few weeks. Please delay it because I'm waiting on my German approval to have dual citizenship before I can take it." So there are cases like that in some strange countries. It happens.
and from an immigration point of view, you have to have some type of citizenship. You can never be that person who has no ties to anywhere, can you?
You do have to have citizenship. There's only a few people, maybe people who are refugees who've been in the United Nations kind of refugee camps where they've lost their status. And again, I don't deal with that, but those are the few cases where people don't have passports and instead they may have documents from the UNHCR or the refugee camp or whatever that reflects their in-between status. But for the most part, everybody has citizenship. Whether or not they have a passport is a different issue. And you can
Now,
show citizenship usually by birth, by your citizenship of birth.
now we've talked about, the few of the podcasts that I listened to on your Ask Evelyn Ackah, immigration lawyer, on your podcast. This term of immigration, this term of mobility immigration, is that being established in the last 6 months at all, or are we any closer to that? American coming up here, or a Canadian going down south and getting that mobility immigration visa?
Mm. It's been talked about, but it's not there yet. I mean, that's what I think people, when NAFTA was created almost 30 years ago, I think that was the plan, was that's what they wanted, but it didn't actually pan out that way. So I haven't heard anything changing, especially now that they've revised NAFTA under the new USMCA, whether or not they're going to actually allow for that flow. Kind of like in the EU, where you could just have gone to different countries and start working. We're not there yet. And I think it's because we need to have some checks and balances on maybe the numbers of people that are here, what they're doing here, and making sure that there's some equality. There's not all Canadians going down to Florida completely, or Hawaii or California, and it's not all Americans from certain states running up to Canada. So I haven't heard that that's actually going through. It's just been talked about, I think, in the media more than on the political front.
And I guess it's one of those things that the immigration would be easy to solve. It comes down to the taxation and where would that taxes be paid? Is that money being earned in the United States or in Canada? So I guess it's more of a taxation issue.
Yeah, I mean, like we've talked before about that visa. I forget what it's called off the top. It's that visa for people who are working all over the world. And other countries, some of them have them, where you can just go and take your laptop and work from Malta or whatever, and you have legal status. We don't have that type of visa that allows you to continue to do that and float around working wherever you are. Not yet. And I think the tax definitely drives that too.
Are there any new rules for obtaining your Canadian citizenship these days? Anything changed over the last 10 years?
Well, there've been changes. When I was reading that question, I was like, What's new? Let me go check what's new because nothing is really new. I mean, the law changed in 2015, and around, some of the eligibility of citizenship based on some of the political things that had happened where a bunch of Canadians, or permanent residents all moved home. So now in order to become a permanent resident, you need to be in Canada as a permanent resident, physically to be able to apply for citizenship 3 years out of 5. And then, you have to show that you filed taxes for that period of time. So it shows that you really have ties to Canada. And then if you're under 55, you have to do the test and the oath. So those are the main changes that were made. Is they increased the age of who needs to write the test. It used to be older, and now they brought it up. And they've also made some restrictions on tax filings and showing that you're in good standing in order to apply for citizenship.
Well, I hear there's a great app out there called the Canada Physical Presence Tracker app.
I've heard about that.
I had to put in that shameless plug. I do apologize. Now, and I think you've kind of answered that question, but can I lose my permanent resident status in Canada?
Yes, you absolutely can. And, a lot of the calls we do get, Gerry, are people who are like, oh, I haven't been able to manage to be here long enough. What can you do to help me keep my PR? And it's very hard because it's about their intention and their past behavior or their past decision making. You can't overcome that. So sometimes if people will literally get their PR and come and spend 10 days in Canada and disappear. And then like after 4.5 years, they're like, oh my God, I have to get back to Canada. They can come back to Canada if it's less than 5 years have passed, but they have to sit in Canada for that 2 years to accumulate that time to apply for the new PR card. So maintaining permanent residence is sometimes different from obtaining the PR card, which is the travel document. The other thing that people can do to maintain their PR is if you are with a Canadian citizen or permanent resident abroad, say your spouse is there for work and you're with that person, you're actually maintaining your PR, even if you're gone for 5 years. And you can renew your card from abroad because you can show you're accompanying a permanent resident or citizen. But the other way that people will lose it is if they have criminality. And unfortunately, like I've had the most interesting case this year where a number of things that happened in their life and they were convicted of several things and all along thought they were basically bulletproof and maybe thought they're even a citizen. They've been here since they were 12 from the UK, only to find out that the criminality and the conviction and the repercussions were then communicated to Canadian immigration. And I got the call to help to try to see what we can do, or he would be deported back to a country he hadn't been to for 20 years, didn't have any family, etc. So it can be lost. And usually it's criminality reasons that people can lose it or the lack of presence in Canada.
We saw a lot of stories during this COVID, this pandemic we went through with couples being separated. And was there any wiggle room when it came to COVID and dealing with this?
I would say there was some wiggle room. I mean, people were able to say I wasn't able to meet my days in Canada because of COVID. The government made some accommodations for a period of time, but after that, they were like, it's enough. Like if you're not able to maintain it, you can come back in. But they felt like everybody was using that as the reason why they didn't maintain their PR. So yes, we had a period of time you couldn't come in or a period of time you couldn't be with your partner, but they were not letting everybody off the hook. So some people were impacted by that change for sure.
Now, I've got one more question, and I really do want to I want to hear a little bit about your parents' immigration from Ghana to Vancouver. But my last question is that how many times can you take the citizenship test? And I can't even imagine what that's like. I'm born on Vancouver Island. I've never really gone anywhere other than back and forth to Maui. I would be worried that I would fail that test as well.
You'd pass it. I don't know if there's a rule. I think it's 2 or 3 times. Most of my clients, all clients pass it. I mean, what they do, Gerry, is they give you the test book, electronically. It's on the government website, and you can also get it by mail, and you just read it and study. And it's like a multiple choice type of test. I'm sure you would pass it, but most people pass it. Even people who are new to Canada and may not even read as well in English, etc. Most people pass it successfully. So I'm sure we would pass it, but we might need to do a little reading up.
Okay. Now, the reason why I'm asking this question about your parents is because I know that the two things that you and I have in common is that we really do like to help people and we really care about people. And why you got into immigration, tell us a little bit about the journey that your parents had to come from Ghana to Vancouver. And I remember in your email that you were separated from your father for 5 years.
Mm-hmm. That's a very common experience with immigrants, I find. I mean, I've had nannies who were separated from their children for 5 years before they could get the family here. So I really relate to it. But just short and brief, my parents are from Ghana. I was born in Ghana. And my dad is so sweet. We have family members, we call them family members. They're from Hungary that were in Ghana at the time. And my parents were married, and they met my dad. And he just did something random and helped them find their way to a bank when everybody else was on lunch and nobody wanted to help. This white, Hungarian guy in Ghana, he was an engineer. And my dad said, sure, I'll take him. And he went. And they became friends. And now they're like family. And that engineer was pivotal in helping my father get to Germany, because he knew that I was coming and that my dad, was so bright, wanted the opportunities, but came from just, very poverty-based, impoverished situation. And so they helped him get to Germany, and he went to school and worked, and he became a Volkswagen Audi mechanic. And while he was there, my mom had me, and then they helped him. That same family left Ghana because they had escaped the Hungarian, crisis there, and worked all over the world as an engineer. And then they moved to Vancouver, and that family helped my dad immigrate to Vancouver in the days when somebody just wrote you a letter and you filled in some forms. This is like 1973, 74. And he became a citizen. And then he brought my mom to Canada to see if she'd like it first. And then he came back to get me. And in all of that journey, 5 years had passed. And so, I met my dad when I was 5 at the airport. And it was like, who's this guy? And so, I was with family and lots of family and support, but it's a very common immigrant experience that there's a separation, because sometimes you cannot bring everybody with you at the same time, or you have to think about, you won't have any infrastructure, no supports, who's going to watch your kid. You just don't have extended family. So sometimes it's actually better that they stay with extended family than they're here and they're in daycare and they don't have any actual family support until they're financially able to manage it. So that's how my story started in Vancouver when I was 5. And I never thought I'd be doing this work. So I'm not sure how it was, but something about that, led me to this via corporate law on Bay Street, somehow realizing that was not what I wanted. And I moved into corporate immigration, which kind of fed the personal relationship side of the work that I love, and also the corporate side, which is not as taxing from a, immigration emotional level as asylum work or refugee work, which is incredibly draining, and you've got to be really committed to doing that type of work.
Well, Evelyn, I really appreciate your time. I love your passion. The fact that you really care is becoming we don't get to hear a lot of those stories out there anymore. So truly appreciate you being on the show this afternoon, and I wish you nothing but the best.
Thank you so much, Gerry. I really appreciate it. I can't wait to see this and listen to it, and I'd love to share it as well with all of my network, so that people can learn more about you and the work you do. Thank you.
Wonderful. Have a great day.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Snowbirds Expat Radio Podcast. Our app is available for your iPhone and your Android. If you have any questions, call me 604-612-7526. Until our next podcast, I'm Gerry Scott.